for Monday, February 12th, 2018. First up is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Sure. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is approval of the minutes for January 8th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any corrections? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are approved. Next up is employee recognition. General Manager Lamb.
Yes, Madam Chair, members, to start off the new year, we didn't have employee recognition formally in December or January, so we're get the double dip in February. And first, I'd like to bring up Chris Royston, who of course is a manager in our rail vehicle maintenance, and he's going to introduce you to two employees. As you know, and I think I'll be able to comment more directly, safety is a hallmark at Metro Transit, and everything we do, we focus in on safety. And while some of my later comments will focus on some of the bus initiatives, today we get to also celebrate some really innovation that's happening on the rail maintenance side. So I'd like to turn it over to Chris to introduce our two employees of the month.
Thank you, Ryan. Madam Chair, with me today is Mike Erickson and Alex Green. Acknowledging them for their efforts with our WIGWAC program. The WIGWAC program for the Type 1, Type 2 LRVs is a safety feature that's been added to make the public aware of the trains. You can think of them like you would emergency lights on the response vehicle, where the lights wig-wag. With these vehicles, we added this feature, so it required redoing the bezels for a modification to the bezels, and both Alex and Mike were able to figure that out. I would like to say that I was able to give them a diagram and say, this is what you do, but actually what it was is, can you do this? You know, and of course they were able to figure that out. It's with their ingenuity and that we're able to do these type of things. To do it outside of Metro Transit would have been very costly. And their efforts both in making themselves available for overtime to get the vehicles ready for the Super Bowl, as well as, like I spoke before, about the figuring out modification. These gentlemen represent the finest of Metro Transit, and without them, you know, we would really have a much longer road to hoe, if you will. So with that being said, at this time, I would like again formally acknowledge Mike and Alex.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Also, it's friends and I. Oh. Maybe Mike and your what'd you try to do?
I just
There's another one if you want that one.
Next is the TAB liaison report. We had to cancel our meeting because of snow. So Peter came here to give us the report from January.
Would have been January 17th.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council members, Mr. Lamb, Mr. Thompson. Today may be your lucky day. Not only is the presentation going to be brief because most everything's on the tab on your agenda, but you get to see me in 2 weeks. So, I mean, does it get any better than that? I think that was shut up. Okay. First of all, on the agency reports from January 17th, MnDOT, MAC, nor MPCA, except for the VW settlement, had a report. In terms of new appointments to the tab, Ramsey County Commissioner Jim McDonough will be the alternate for Ramsey County Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire. And new appointments to the Met Council, both from Metro Cities and from Met Council, will be announced at the next tab meeting, which is February 24th. And to review on the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee members, from Chanhassen is Paul Omi, who's the chair of the Funding and Programming He is the planning director and city engineer for the city of Chanhassen. And the tax planning committee is Jan Lucky from Washington County, where she is the planning and planning director for that county. And of course, the chair from Councilmember Barbara's neck of the woods is Lisa Fries, who's the transportation planning and program director for Scott County. Because most of the items on your agenda today were coming from TAB, I will only concentrate on 3 items that are not before you today. One is the regional solicitation functional classifications map. The background, as you know, is a regional solicitation is the biennial allocation of federal transit fund through the TAB. The Fed rules require that the money's used for designated projects or regional needs. And this means in roadway projects, it must be for an A minor arterial or a non-freeway principal arterial called NFPA. It only took me 3 years to figure out what that was. Okay. And recently, TAC approved changes to the functional classification changes, I should say, I'm repeating myself, from February 2016 through December of 2017. And those items, just so you know, for Councilmember Lutovsky, there's just a couple of roadway classification changes on the Lowry Avenue from Broadway to New Brighton. It was upgraded to an A minor. For Councilmember Elkins, Vernon Ave from Highway 62 to 100 is now an A minor reliever, and those were both at the request of Hennepin County. And for the chair, the road opening from County Road 47 to 54th Avenue in Plymouth was at the request of the Met Council. And for Vice Chair Shriver and the chair, Highway 610, which is now open, has always been a principal arterial, but has been added to what is called the data set. Another item that was brought to TAB that you may want to know because it affects your colleague of District 13, Councilmember Richard Kramer. There was a project, and it had quite a bit of discussion at the TAB, for the West St. Paul multi-use trail at Oakdale Avenue and Marie Avenue. And where it had a lot of discussion is a sidewalk on the north side of Marie Avenue was eliminated in favor of a multi-use trail and sidewalk on the south side. And that was to save money. And that comes from the rights of way, which I'll get to in just a second. But the reason for is that because on the south side, and again, if you happen to run into Mr. Kramer, most of the residential is on the south side. In fact, 50% of the high-density, low-income housing is on the south side. The north side is primarily commercial establishments with their own parking and autos are being used. But there are 2 bus pads on the north side as well. The bicycle pedestrian representatives informed us that the advocates for this multi-use trail were fine with this change. But more importantly for this body is that the rights of way have never been fully established as to who funds them. Although they are eligible for federal funding, and perhaps the chair can comment more on this, most applicants do not go for federal funding because of it's neither timely nor easy. In fact, it's quite cumbersome. And let me see, and the last is the VW settlement. I won't go through all of the but there was Chair, is the commission going to be, I'm sorry, is the committee going to be getting the handout on the primer, if you will, on the VW settlement?
I don't think we have it tonight, but we could get that.
Could be a good future item, yeah.
Okay,
That would be helpful.
should I go through quickly or just let them read this? It's up to your call, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'm getting nods. Yes, please go through.
Okay, very good. As you know, the Volkswagen, as background, Volkswagen intentionally modified its emissions and deceived a number of folks about it. There were almost 600,000 cars nationwide, of which 93,000 were in Minnesota, and it contributed to an extra 600 tons of nitrous oxide into the Minnesota air. The money can be used for 2 things. One is to take an old vehicle, particularly diesel, off the street and replace it, or electric vehicle charging stations. It is said by MPCA that one new diesel will replace 30 old diesels. Now, only 15% of the money can be used for charging stations. And to give you an idea, the charging stations go from a cost of $500 to $1,000 for 18 hours of charging to anywhere upwards of almost $500,000 for a minute to 5 minutes. So it's quite a range. And obviously, the cost for about 5 minutes is, I believe, Chair Thornton said Representative Thornton said it was $100 to $150,000. It handles, just so you know, diesels in class 4 to class 8, which are basically your delivery trucks to buses and big garbage hauling, those kind of cement mixers. It does also apply to locomotives, some ocean-going vessels, forklifts, ferries, tugs, things like that. But again, only 15% of the funds can be used for charging stations. And in terms of vehicle replacement, the split is, if a bus company wanted to replace an old diesel with a new diesel, they pay 75% of the cost, and the federal funds would pay 25% of the cost. And I think that would be it. The rest would be self-explanatory in the handout from the MPCA. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee members? If not, MTS Director Thompson.
Yes, Madam Chair, members, thank you. A few updates. Last Monday was the close of the applications for the Quarters of Commerce program that we talked about. MnDOT received 300 responses for project proposals. There are a lot of duplicates in there. I would guess that roughly 200 of them are unique project designs. 108 of those applications were in the metro area. As we had presented before, the Met Council submitted 10 unique projects. MnDOT is going through the list. I didn't want to share the list with tonight yet because it's just they're going through and trying to sort that, but it'll be coming shortly. There are some that we are clearly not eligible projects that will be eliminated, but there's probably about 200 projects that will be evaluated for the $400 million. In our region, all 7 counties had projects, and then the 2 counties that are part of the MPO, Sherburne and Wright, also had projects. So well represented in the region. So we're working through that, and we'll have a list out before, and then items on the future agendas. Also, last week we completed our Metro Mobility Task Force, held its last meeting. They unanimously voted for the recommendations, the report. We got final comments to this by noon today for the report, so we're finishing that report. As a reminder, it's the task force report, and they required to submit it to the legislature by the 15th of February. They'll be meeting that, and then after it's submitted, we'll come back and talk about the findings and their recommendations from that in front of this body. Next week, a note I think went out about some tab orientation. We have new tab members, where you are welcome to attend one of those meetings on the 14th or the 16th. We go through
This week.
this week, excuse me. We go through just kind of what tab is, but how the meeting works. It's good orientation, not just for new members, but all members, so you're welcome to attend that. And then, as Member DeGan mentioned, we adopted a new map, and I'll give you a little highway trivia for you. I think that map included the first time we've converted a principal arterial to a local road in this region without changing the road. That would be the old St. Croix Bridge is now a locally owned road, and we didn't change the road, but it's no longer a principal arterial. I thought that was some interesting highway trivia for the back of your mind for 15 years from now. So with that, Madam Chair, concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from committee members? If not, tab member began had 3 dates, and I think you've received an email. So the new member orientations, and this is for new members, not just council appointed members. It's February 14th, 10 to 11:30, February 14th, 3:30 to 5, and then the 16th, 9 to 10:30, if anybody wants to attend. Next up, General Manager Lamb.
Yes, Madam Chair, members, after being detoured during Super Bowl festivities, several of our busiest routes returned to the Nicollet Mall on A Street. early on Saturday morning. Yes. Staff report a smooth transition for both operators and customers. The return to regular routing comes with an additional bonus for Nicollet Mall customers who can now use a dozen new shelters that have on-demand heat, light, and real-time signs installed during the on that transitway during this last month. Um, and there's still cold weather where we can actually use it. And second, the bus safety's been at its highest, best levels in nearly 2 decades. The number of bus collisions and passenger falls reached its lowest level in 18 years last year, a testament to not only Metro Transit's skilled operator, but also its effective training at all stages of an operator career. And I want to put this in context. Fully 50% of the operators at Metro Transit now have less than 5 years seniority. That's the youngest average seniority age in our history, I believe, at least the history in which I've been kind of affiliated with the agency. So being able to identify operators kind of operational challenges on the front end and proactively train for those, whether it's weather related, whether it's difficult situations like detours or how to navigate through the Super Bowl, which, by the way, during the Super Bowl activities at 10 days, we did not have a single injury report from our customer base, so we're very pleased with that. But overall, a very solid year from a bus safety perspective. And finally, I want to say that bus maintenance will begin soon using synthetic oil across its fleet that will create significant savings without impacting performance. What I mean by that is we will now be converting to an every 12,000 mile oil change over our 6,000 with all mile intervals, and that will save not only in the oils but the oil filter as well. And so we will roll that out progressively, and we'll have the fleet completely converted by May of this year. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Okay, thank you. We can proceed to the business part of our agenda. On the consent agenda, there's 2 items. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On non-consent, the first item is 2018-40, concur with the Transportation Advisory Board's actions to approve the regional solicitation. And we have Elaine here to present.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm here to request that the Met Council concur with the tab action to approve the regional solicitation and its release. I have a PowerPoint. A few months ago, I'll just get started. A few months ago, the Metropolitan Transportation staff presented an overview of the solicitation. As you may recall, in 2014, TAB and the Metropolitan Council approved a reorganization of the solicitation into 3 modal categories. The roadways, bicycle and pedestrian, and then also transit and travel demand management. And applications were set up by project type within these categories, and the categories and the applications remain the same in this solicitation as the last 2. The draft regional solicitation was released for public comment in December. We received 4 comments from the public, plus additional comments came through the committee process. Shakopee City Council member expressed the need for increased river crossing roadway capacity. 2 members from the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee would like to see requirements tightened up on applicants having an Americans with Disability Act transition plan as a qualifying criteria. And the Director of Public Works from Maple Grove supports the increased weighting of the criterion for the role in the regional transportation system and economy, which is in the roadway expansion category, but acknowledge that this disadvantages new corridors the criterion measures favor management of the existing corridors. Because of limited federal funding, the focus of TAB has been to select the funds for fixing existing problems versus future problems. From the Funding and Programming Committee and Technical Advisory Committee, there were 2 additional changes made after it went out for public comment. The first recommendation was to change language in congestion reduction so that the measure that all projects would be using optimized signalization, so all projects would be starting at the same point, and that all projects would then be more likely to make small changes to improve the congestion reduction before they did expansion of the project. The second recommendation was to remove right-of-way costs as an eligible expense for federal funds in the bicycle and pedestrian applications. Currently, projects may request federal funding for the right-of-way costs, or very few applicants were requesting the funding, and they were including it in their total project costs. Many other applicants had right-of-way costs, but were funding it through local funds and not including it. So those that were including it in the total costs were being disadvantaged in the point scoring and the ranking. And currently, the right-of-way is not eligible in the roadway applications, so this would make the applications similar. TAB approved the solicitation package for release, which brings it to this committee. TAB approved continuing the modal funding ranges, the 3 categories we had. This allows flexibility in the project selection. The modal ranges shown on the screen reflect the historic distribution since 2003. Approximately $200 million will be available in 2022 and 2023. TAB also approved a minimum of $10 million for bridges within the roadways categories modal group to start with. The distribution within these categories will be determined next fall when they're actually looking at the projects when they're ranked. I would like to highlight a few of the changes in the applications. As we mentioned, part of the public comment came from 2 of our TAC members. TAB has added a requirement that applicants have adopted or are working toward the completion of an ADA transition plan. The ADA transition plan is a requirement of the Americans with Disability Act. Public entities with 50 employees or more are required to have an ADA transition plan and keep it updated. Because of this requirement, FHWA recommends compliance to receive the federal transportation funds. So for this solicitation, TAB added the qualifying criteria that at minimum the applicants must be working toward it if they have not adopted one, and that by the next solicitation, all applicants would have approved plans in order to be eligible to apply. TAB also incorporated major regional studies that have been adopted by the council. Higher priority projects within the principal arterial intersection conversion study will receive more points in the roadway expansion and reconstruction applications. In the roadway reconstruction application, projects located on one of the 50 or so high priority project locations in the congestion management and safety plan will receive more points. And in the roadway applications, projects on a higher level tier in the regional truck study will receive more points. There was also some revised weighting of the criterion measures. Weighting was changed to reflect the changes with the studies that were added, and also to reduce some of the points for the measures that were not differentiating the projects. The equity measure was also updated. We've asked the applicants in the past to identify the benefits and impacts of their projects, and if there was impacts, what mitigations they would do to mitigate those. What we found was the applicants were only identifying the benefits, so the project application measure was changed to ask that they include any outreach they've done with communities that are in their project area so that they can identify both the benefits and the negative effects, and also get feedback from the community of what could be done to mitigate those impacts. And then the measure then divided the points into 3 subsets, so they have to answer each set to get points. And then there was also a measure added to the multi-use trail application in the usage criterion, awarding points for an applicant having a maintenance plan for snow removal on the trails. For our outreach, council staff is currently updating the regional solicitation website and will post announcements on information for applying and the scheduled workshops and training sessions. We are planning to hold 2 regional solicitation workshops. We are working with Metro Cities to hold one of them. They will have volunteered to host one of the sessions, and we'll hold one also here. We will utilize the email and social media outreach of the council to reach the local government and agency partners, and then we will send out a press release when the solicitation is released. On this slide, we have the schedule going forward. We have received approval through TAB. We will be going to the council on February 28th with approval here. Following that, we will look at holding workshops. We're looking right now at mid-April and hopefully, if not early May, 2 workshops. The application is anticipated to be released by middle May, hopefully sooner if we get the online applications done, with the applications due in mid-July. In the fall, the applications will be reviewed for qualifying and then scored and ranked. And we'll get to go through the committee process for approval at TAB in next January. The projects would then come to the Transportation Committee and Council after that for review, and these projects will be added to the 2020 to 2023 TIP for approval next summer. With that, I'll leave it open for questions.
Are there further questions? Or are there any questions? If not, I have one, Elaine. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Dorfman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a question. With the president unveiling the transportation infrastructure proposal today, do we take a look at that to see how it might impact future regional solicitations and impact our region?
I did actually just see that right before this meeting, and what I saw in there, the recommendation was that the projects would receive federal funding of 20% versus the 80%, asking that the locals provide more of the match. That may really impact who applies. So Phil actually was not sure.
I was just curious.
Director Thompson.
Madam Chair, members, we will closely monitor that and see how it impacts both the money, maybe could impact a few ways. The amount of money available to the region and the solicitation could change. And then new criteria could come in from some of these sources. So we'll monitor that throughout. Right now, it's an idea that was introduced, but until something's passed, we won't make changes unless but we'll monitor it closely.
Thank you.
Are there further questions? Elaine, I have a question, and I just wanted to be clear with the committee members as well. Sometime in the fall, TAB will make a decision about the funding goals. And so if you look at that, the current solicitation ranges, what we've done in the last 2 cycles is pick the midpoint, which is then the historical midpoint of funding, as Elaine said. So that will be one decision. And then if you look up above at the application categories, the second decision after those midpoint decisions will be, would you look at expansion heavy or reconstruction modernization heavy or equal among the different categories or historically funded. And I just wanted to request that we give the council members a heads up when that's coming through the tab. And then you can coordinate with your tab members that represent your districts. Because those are sort of 2 pretty critical decisions that get done. And it's usually September.
About September, Chair, about September we have the rank, September, I'm going to say maybe more October because they're scoring through September. We would have the initial list that we do bring through the committees and TAB as information first also, and then we bring it through as action. So we could bring it through the Council Transportation Committee at the same time as it's going through as information.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is 2018-1 Memorandum of Understanding with MnDOT for MPO performance measures, and Katie White is here.
Chair and members, my name is Katie White. I'm a senior planner at MTS, and today's action item is fairly straightforward for the group. Per federal regulations, the council must select performance targets for required federal performance measures in coordination with the DOT, in our case MnDOT. Both MnDOT and the council must establish targets either annually or on a 2- or 4-year basis. MnDOT is responsible for establishing the statewide targets, after which the council has 6 months to either support the state targets or adopt different targets. We're in the middle of this process right now. The safety targets were released late last year, and we're going to be seeing some newer ones come out later this year in 2018. It's sort of a rolling on a cycle right now. In either case, the council must report both the targets and all data associated with the performance measures to MnDOT. And that's in federal regulations, and so that's something that the council is prepared to be doing. FHWA has asked the DOTs and the local partners to pass an MOU, to adopt an MOU, to formalize that relationship and information sharing. And so that is the action item here for you today. It's basically codifying our existing practice. We would do this without an MOU, but because our federal partners have asked us to formalize it with this documentation, we are happy to do so. Included in your packet today is the draft MOU text itself, which you'll notice is pretty basic and simple because this is ongoing work that we would do regardless. And also we have attached a procedures document. This is the document that will evolve over time as the federal agencies give us our new standards, as MnDOT adopts the new targets. This document will continue to be updated. The MOU itself will not be updated as regularly. So we included the most recent version of the procedures document for your information today, but the action is on the MOU itself. And Chair and members, I'm happy to take any questions.
Seeing no questions, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is 2018-5. It's the same week item. It's the Southwest LRT property owner and tenant advisory contract amendments. And Robin Kaufman.
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Robin Kaufman. I'm the Assistant Director for Administration, Communication, and Outreach for both Southwest and Blue Line Extension light rail projects. And I'm here today to present an amendment to our one of our contracts. But before we do that, I thought I would give an update on our right-of-way process. So just to provide a little bit of background, back in September of 2016, the council authorized a special approval or delegation of authority for the acquisition of right-of-way. And you can see here in the table, the middle column shows the standard council policy for the level of authority or approval that's needed to acquire parcels, to make offers, or to initiate condemnation process for right-of-way based on the value amount or dollar amount. And back in 2016, the council took action to authorize special level of authority based on the value, so that it was a staff level approval. One of the reasons for this is that Southwest LRT project does have 153 parcels, and so if we were to bring all of those actions to you, we would be here and consume the majority of your agenda items for a year or so. So that delegation was made, but it was also very considerate as well. So you can see that anything that is above $250,000 for offers would go to the regional administrator for approval. And that actually translates to about a third of the parcels, which translates into about 94% of the value. Conversely, about 2/3 of the parcels are a lot of smaller temporary easements or smaller partial acquisitions. And so those, that 2/3 of the number of parcels only equates to about 6% of the value of the parcels, and those are the ones that are delegated to the general manager, the program director, or the project director to authorize making the offer. Also, at that same action, one of the conditions for that of that approval was that we would be providing right-of-way updates to the council on a quarterly basis. So now that we are starting to acquire property in earnest, we, I think, acquired our first property late last fall. And so this is the first report basically for 2017, and we'll be providing reports going forward on a quarterly basis. In addition to that, there was a few actions in 2016. The council passed a resolution declaring the valid public purpose for the Southwest project, and that would allow for the use of condemnation for parcels if it was needed. Then in 2017, we brought three actions to the council that included 18 parcels. Those are all over $1 million. And we presented those for council action to authorize the use of condemnation if it was necessary. So this is just a map that shows the location of the 153 private parcels that we're in the process of acquiring for Southwest. The orange dots are the station locations, and the small red dots are those parcels that are in some phase of the process, whether negotiation or somewhere in the condemnation process. And then the larger blue dots represent the 25 parcels that we have acquired so far. And this is just a breakdown through January of 2018. We have acquired or completed the acquisition process for 25 parcels. We have another 15 parcels or so that we do have offers either accepted or we've reached settlement on a value. There's another 36 that are somewhere in the condemnation process with title and possession sometime between now and May. And then there's another 77 parcels that we've made offers, and there's somewhere in the owners considering them, or we're in the process of negotiating. So that brings the total to the 153. So I think that was my quick update on the right-of-way. I can pause for any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I can jump into the business item.
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Dorfman.
So I'm vaguely remembering something. So, and I know you're talking about sort of major acquisitions here. So I vaguely remember that there were a number of residences along the corridor that backed up to the trail. And there were issues where those residents had viewed all the way up to the trail as their backyard, even though there was clearly some right-of-way that wasn't. And there was some decisions made, I believe, by Hennepin County about that parcel some number of years ago, and taxing people or not taxing. And so I'm just curious, where it's a residential homeowner whose backyard goes, how do we deal? Are we doing acquisitions there too? Or, I mean, are they losing some of their backyard? Kind of. And I don't remember how many there were, but.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Commissioner Dorfman, Councilmember Dorfman, I think a lot of those dots, you can see the cluster. I think where you're talking about is along the railroad corridor, Minneapolis. You can see there's quite a few dots. There's probably two items going on. There are some encroachments in the county right-of-way, and so we will be needing to notify people, and we will be giving them, sufficient notice and time so that they can relocate if they have any fences or personal property in those areas. Right. So I think that's one item that we'll need to be doing. There are some easements, maybe construction easements or small sliver. Yeah. We're not acquiring any homes or that are requiring relocation. All the relocations have been businesses or tenants.
Okay, thanks. I remember there were a number of them in Eden Prairie as well, I thought. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll proceed with the business item. So for a little bit of background, back in summer of 2015, in 2014, in 2014, we issued a request for proposals for hiring relocation for hiring a relocation specialist. We call them property owner and tenant advisory services. This is basically to assist the businesses that are affected by property acquisition that will need to relocate. So we issued a competitive RFP and received seven proposals and ended up moving forward with those 7 contractors. And in 2015, we did issue a notice to proceed for them to start working. They at that point met with the property owners and started to assess the relocation needs, as well as start to identify tenants, and then notify them of their rights under the Uniform Relocation Act. Then in 2016, they started to assist with the planning efforts, or planning and relocation efforts. So they provided notices of eligibility that meant that people are eligible to receive reimbursement for eligible relocation costs in 2016, and then started working with those individuals on a plan and also assisted them in trying to find replacement sites. And then so back in when we initially procured this contract, we had identified about 25 parcels that needed relocation and estimated about 100 tenants or displacees that would be eligible for relocation. Now in 2017, one of the issues is that we have actually identified 170 occupants. And one of the reasons for this is that prior to the acquisition process, we can talk to property owners, and they can tell us if they choose about their tenants and how many people they have, but they're not obligated to do so, and we cannot do the research prior to that. Once we start to acquire the property, we are eligible and are legally allowed to go in and start to interview and identify the tenants. And so what we found is that there's a lot more tenants in some of these larger industrial buildings, and that there's tenants that have subleases that maybe the property owner didn't know about. And so subleases are eligible for relocation reimbursement under the Uniform Relocation Act. And so that's why the number increased so substantially from 100 to 170 tenants that we are now working with to relocate. And so with that, we have discovered that we need to amend the contracts. We are requesting a sole source for this because a lot of these consultants have been working with the property owners and the tenants, for over a year or so now, and to go out and do a fresh procurement and reassign. There's a lot of knowledge transfer, a lot of understanding, a lot of trust that's been built between the property owners and tenants and our consultants that are assisting with that relocation. So we are requesting a sole source in order to allow them to be able to maintain that relationship and continue the successful relocation efforts. So you can see here, the original contract was combined contracts were valued at $800,000. And you can see in the table that we are requesting about $265,000 amendment. We did do an assessment based on the tenants and the displacees that the businesses or that each of these consultants assigned to, and based on the complexity and the issues, we have assessed how much is needed for those, and so that's why you can see the various amounts. And we did anticipate that we may find some additional ones, so we did include some additional funding in some of them, some of the contracts, so that we can do a competitive search for proposals, so that if we find a new tenant, we can approach the consultants and ask them for bids for helping that tenant relocate. And so you can see there the total amount, an increase by each one. And so what we're requesting is to approve sole source contract amendments to 6 of these, 6 of the property owner and tenant advisory service contracts, and to increase as shown in the list there, the business items. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there questions from committee members?
I'll move the
Councilmember
agenda.
Modal. Oh,
Madam Chair, Robin, I'm wondering at what point the property acquisitions happen, given the uncertainty of the project right now.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Munt, we are actually well into the relocation. All of the property owners, since we have made offers on all the properties, and so all of the property owners and tenants have received notice that they are eligible to relocate, and a lot of them have already started doing so. We actually have, I want to say it's probably close to 20 properties or tenants that have already completed their relocation, so they're out of their former site and into a new site, and there's many that are in midstream.
Councilmember Dorfman.
I think it's I'm getting more of those kinds of questions from people. And so I do think that's an explanation we ought to give. I mean, people read in the paper. I'm still optimistic that we'll move forward, but a lot of people are asking that question of until you get the full funding grant agreement and there's all the sign-offs required, how are you justifying moving forward? And I think we need to provide that answer to people so we all understand.
I mean, I think that we need to continue with the right-of-way, and those that are in process, there would be a lot of problem with a timeline if we don't continue with those. So it would not make sense to unravel those deals that have been started. That's a simple answer to your question.
But Madam Chair, I just think in bigger scale, and not today, but we need some guidance about that, because we're hearing from people that I like to be a cheerleader and say we're moving forward and it's all going to work out, and I believe that, but people are skeptical too. So.
Do you have anything further?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, I think one of the things that staff would be very well prepared to do in the next month cycle is to give kind of that larger interrelated Gantt chart, if you will, of activities to the chair's point. Ultimately, we're still on track for opening the bids in May and ultimately, awarding the contract with an LOMP approval with the federal government. And at that point, we absolutely want to make sure we have control of the parcels so that we can execute against that construction contract. That's a long story short, but I think to your point, the council needs to be confident that these things are indeed interrelated and that the sequencing of events make sense, and that both from the council and as well as the county's perspective, that the risks associated with moving forward versus any sort of a detail are well considered, and that you are moving forward with the best confidence possible in a very uncertain era.
Thank you. Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, I have always believed that a light rail line dies 1,000 deaths before the first passenger ever rides. And I'm glad that this item is on the agenda today so that we can show forward momentum. But there is a lot of uncertainty in the public's mind, and I think they need to see confidence and forward momentum from us.
Further questions? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one opposed. Motion carries. Next up is 2018-34, also with Southwest Light Rail. It's the construction monitoring for contaminated materials contract award, and Kelsey Campbell is here.
Good
Present.
afternoon,
Thank you.
Madam Chair and committee members. I'm Kelsey Campbell. I'm the Environmental Project Manager for the Southwest LRT project, and I'm here today to present business item 2018-34, requesting that we authorize and award the contract for construction monitoring for contaminated materials in an amount not to exceed $2,145,606 to SEH. The purpose of this contract is to provide technical oversight of the civil contractor during construction to ensure compliance with regulatory procedures and to implement the response action plans that have been reviewed and approved by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. This contract was competitively procured and 4 proposals were received and evaluated on their technical merits. And then we moved forward with SEH as the recommended proposal, and we completed negotiation in January 2018. With that, I'll happy to take any questions.
Other questions from committee members? Nope. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved and seconded. If there's not further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, 2018-30 on the Metro Blue Line extension, master funding agreements with corridor cities. Mary Sue Abel, welcome to the committee.
We're the other light rail project. We want to be involved.
Yes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Mary Sue Abel, and I'm here today to seek your approval to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute master funding agreements with our corridor cities of Brooklyn Park, Crystal, Robbinsdale, Golden Valley, and Minneapolis. A master funding agreement is used to establish the framework that we will use to transfer funds between the corridor, between the project, the council, and in this case, our corridor cities. Future subordinate funding agreements will actually provide the specific details of each scope of work and any funding terms that would be associated with that SFA. So again, negotiations and executions of these MFAs do not obligate the council or the cities to any funding. Rather, future SFAs would identify those needs. So just to restate, today is seeking your approval to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute master funding agreements with our corridor cities. Short and sweet. Do you guys have any questions? Thank you.
I move adoption, Madam Chair.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is 2018-43 Mall of America Transit Station Renovation Bid Rejection. And Derek, I think it's Berube?
Berube, very close.
And Pat Jones. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Chair, committee members, I'm Derek Berube with the Engineering and Facilities Division of Metro Transit, and I'm here today to present business item 2018-43 Mall of America Bid Rejection. As many of you know, 2.6 million riders annually utilize their busiest station at the Mall of America, and in the past 25 years, there's only been one major renovation down there, which was a light rail coming in 2004. So this is the newest renovation project that we're hoping to have happen down since 2004. So just a little background, but on January 29th, the Metropolitan Council received 3 bids for this project, and all 3 bids were greater than the construction budgeted amount of $22 million. Going forward, Metro Transit plans to consider scope reductions or changes that reduce construction costs without affecting the project and the future functionality of the facility. Our Metro Transit's design team is already mobilized to work on this task, and meetings with stakeholders have already been set up in the area to discuss potential scope reductions and rebid the project. Our current staff recommends rejecting the 3 bids that were received, updating the documents for rebid in March of 2018. If the rebid comes in as expected and the reduction of costs are there for reasonable responses, Construction would start in June of 2018, which would be a 3-month delay in the current construction project. So with that, I ask if there's any questions or clarification that the committee may have.
Councilmember Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So recently, the bus area was relocated. Will we move it back for 3 months? Because it's poorly signed and doesn't work too well.
Madam Chair, Committee Member Elkins, that move actually did occur already.
Okay.
It moved down this morning to the existing location that was prior to the project, and the plan is to keep it there until we're ready to begin construction.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dorfman.
So, thank you for that explanation. Would you explain something to me? So if the original budget was 22 million, the bids came in over that, more than the 2.5 million. Where are we authorizing a new NTE budget of 25 million if we want to bring the cost down?
Madam Chair, committee members, the NTE budget amount includes both the original contract for design with our design team as well as our staff time as well.
Okay.
So that's the difference between the 25 and the 22.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing there.
Councilmember Munn.
Madam Chair, Derek, my recollection was that we had hoped to have this work done pre-Super Bowl. Is that correct? And does that affect the bid?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Munn, that is correct. Our original plan was to hopefully get off the ground with construction prior to the Super Bowl. But we are short a funding amount that was recently given to us this past legislative session from the state GO bonds that were given to the Metro Transit for this specific project. So with that, we received those funds late May of 2016, and due to the compressed schedule to get anything completed prior to Super Bowl, it was thought better to wait until after Super Bowl with a better bidding climate over the winter. More contractors aren't trying to bid in June, July while they're out busy at that time frame. So that is the reason for not getting it completed prior to.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for the update. I'm pleased that we're working with our project partners to get this back out on the street and get this needed project done. So
I'll move the approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is 2018-39, same week. It's Sea Line and Penn Avenue Road Construction Contract Award. And Katie Roth is here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Rodriguez, committee members. Katie Roth, manager of arterial BRT for Metro Transit. We're here today to seek approval to award a construction contract for the Sea Line, so a major milestone in moving the Sea Line project forward. Before Sean Walding, who's the project engineer on the Sea Line, brings the business item for your approval, I have a brief update on the project and where we'll be headed over the course of 2018. So the Sea Line, of course, is the region's second rapid bus line after the A Line, traveling about 8.5 miles between downtown Minneapolis and Brooklyn Center. This is much like the A Line, going to be a faster rapid service with pre-boarding fare payment, enhanced stations, all-door boarding on 60-foot buses, some of which will be our first battery electric buses in the Metro Transit fleet, along with signal priority and construction for the corridor. This line is planned to open on Olson Highway in its iteration on opening day in 2019. It will have temporary stations along Olson Highway that will then be moved. We will build permanent stations on Glenwood Avenue, and the Sea Line will move down to Glenwood Avenue once the Blue Line extension opens on Olson Highway. This is a very busy corridor today, and we hope to increase ridership in the future. And our project budget is $20 million for the non-fleet project components. That includes the construction contract here today, as well as construction in a couple of other contracts, buying the shelters, fare collection equipment, and the rest of the project. This map is one I've shared with you in the past. It's complicated, but I think it tells the story of a project that's being delivered through a series of partnerships. The partnerships that we're here focused most on today are those along Penn Avenue with Hennepin County. We are very lucky in that this project has been able to be aligned with a lot of improvements along the corridor, from the Brooklyn Boulevard reconstruction to downtown on 8th Street, but most importantly, making a substantial investment on Penn Avenue with the reconstruction of 5 full intersections where we'll have stations, as well as an additional just over a half mile of full street reconstruction. The blue and orange pieces on this map will all be constructed by a single contractor under contract to Metro Transit, which is a very important part of this partnership. And I think as you'll see when we get into the bids, it's something that's been, we've seen this as a very efficient way to deliver these types of rapid bus improvements, is to pair them with other street improvements that are in the plans as well. Our timeline is shown here, stretching from 2018 into 2019. Since the calendar turned into January, we've really been focused on getting ready for construction. And so bids were opened on January 10th. We're bringing this authorization to award over the course of January and into February, and we expect to give our contractor a notice to proceed pending the council's approval in late February. We are also working on developing some of the framework for a groundbreaking ceremony, and we'll be in communication with the council as details around this advance. We want to get really excited with our community about starting these improvements on Penn Avenue, and look for that to be happening in the mid-March timeframe. Also, I wanted to highlight that prior to construction beginning, we're going to be holding a construction kickoff information meeting for our station neighbors, our construction neighbors along Penn Avenue, as well as on the rest of the corridor. The details of that meeting are shown here. It's going to be on March 22nd in the evening at the UROC facility, which is right near our Penn and Plymouth station on the Sea Line. And there we'll invite people to get information on how to stay updated during construction, what's going to be happening, approximately when we expect it to be happening, as well as providing an opportunity for customers to give their input on some changes that will be happening to Route 19 after the C line opens. So much like when the A line opened, the Route 84 went to a reduced frequency and had some other changes, we'll be looking at similar changes to the Route 19 for when the C line opens in 2019. So starting in March or April, depending on what the weather looks like around that time of the year, we expect to start construction. The heavy construction would carry across the bulk of 2018 and wrap up in December of 2018, transitioning into more of the systems integration and testing component of construction that'll carry us through the winter months into the spring of 2019. Right around the end of the year this year, we expect to take delivery of our first buses on the C line in November, December, January timeframe. And all of this will be aligning toward a spring 2019 service launch. So with that, I'll hand things over to Sean for the business item.
Thank you, Katie. Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Sean Combs-Walding, project engineer with the BRT Small Starts Project Office at Metro Transit. Just wanted to get into a bit of details, not too much detail, hopefully, for this construction contract. It does highlight that piece that Katie was talking about, partnerships, and how we're leveraging those partnerships to get good projects delivered in an efficient way. The project essentially breaks into two significant pieces. One is that Metro Transit work that is working towards developing those BRT platforms that are along the C line. We also have a Hennepin County roadway portion, so that's comes in different flavors of roadway construction, the main piece being the full road reconstruction between Broadway and Lowry. But back to those platforms, and just to break down a little bit of what our work is, we're going to do work in this contract to complete 33 BRT platforms. That includes the civil flat work, that's all the concrete work for the platforms. That includes a portion of the intersections that Hennepin County is also reconstructing. So it would be 2 of the 4 quadrants that those BRT platforms would be on. It also includes all of our vertical amenities. So that those are the pylon, the shelter, and our other ticket vending equipment, and other vertical features that are on those platforms as well. In addition to that, we'll have transit signal priority as we have on the A line. That will also be on the C line corridor at 23 signals along that corridor, giving us a faster and more reliable trip along C line. And in this partnership, we start to discover ways that we can optimize and find opportunities to work together. Fiber optic networking is a piece that's needed for our communications equipment on C line, and Hennepin County will be partnering with us on that as they seek to develop their fiber network as well. As Katie mentioned, this contract will include the construction of those temporary stations on Olson Memorial Highway as well. That county roadway piece, as I said, there's a full road reconstruction between Broadway and Lowry on Penn Avenue. In addition, there are segments of mill and overlay that extend even farther than that. That's kind of one of the last pieces of construction that gives us that nice smooth ride that we'll expect on the first day of C-Line. That's a really big advantage that we found in A-Line as well, when we do have that new surface to ride on. There will be some new and modified signal construction that's happening with that road reconstruction. And as we said before, the other component of that intersection reconstruction will be Hennepin County and their desire to complete that as well. I want to break into the bids a little bit to show you what happened when we opened bids on January 10th of this year. We found ourselves with several bidders, so 5 bidders on this project. Those ranged in cost from around $13 million up to about $15.3 million. The low bid, as you see here, was Thomas & Sons Construction at right around $13 million. The number of bidders and the amounts shown here showed us to be in a competitive bid market. Our estimate, the bid came in significantly less than our engineer's estimate. And that bid, along with others, passed the DBE review of participation of 20% on this project. And you see that specific breakdown of that work that I shared before. Metro Transit shares around $6.7 million, and Hennepin County share is around $6.3 million. And so with that, we'd ask that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute the contract 17P256 with Thomas & Sons Construction Incorporated for the construction of the C-Line, BRT, and Penn Avenue Road Construction Project at a cost of $12,976,110. With that, we'll take some questions.
Are there any questions from committee members, council members?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Harper.
She forgot who I was.
I did.
So I have a question actually about Route 19 during construction. So because it is a busy route and it serves a very transit-dependent area, what's the plan to maintaining the consistency of service over that time period during construction?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Barber, great question. This is one of the items that we're going to be sharing a lot of public information about in the upcoming months, including at that open house on the 22nd of March. In general, there are a couple of plans in place for that route. One is that effective with the March service change of this year, there are going to be a couple minutes added to the schedule so that our operators have adequate recovery time and the next trip can start on time if there's a construction impact to the route. The second piece is that as we move through construction, we're going to be encouraging our riders to sign up for rider alerts on their mobile phones and get all the information that they can because we want to keep it up to date. And with the nature of this construction, going intersection by intersection, there will be a series of detours that may shift from time to time and maybe a combination of detours. So we're going to be doing our best to make that information available at the outset, get people signed up for information, and then put the maps out there, sign at the bus stops, keep it consistent for folks to the extent that we can, knowing that it's going to be changing quite a bit over the course of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, folks, do you know if Thomas & Sons employs union construction workers or not?
Madam Chair, council members, I would have to verify that. I don't know specifically, so I'd have to ask. I'd have to look.
Are there further questions? Councilmember Commerce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question as this relates to the earlier case with the bidding process for the Mall of America station. Just wondering, how do we sort of square up those two cases? The earlier case leads to a conclusion about the tightness of the market, et cetera. This leads to a very different conclusion. I'm just wondering if you can fill us in on your thoughts about that.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Commerce, I'll defer to Brian if he has anything else to add to this, but I would also offer that we were surprised by the nature of the bids that came in And our friends on the roadway construction side, Hennepin County, suspected that might be the case, but coming from the transit more vertical side, we didn't think necessarily. So I think a large portion of what we may be seeing is because of the large component of road reconstruction work that isn't the specialized type of transit work that we may be seeing more of in Mall of America.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Cummers, just building on that for a second, when you take a look at the complexity of the Mall of America, the number of kind of subcontract specialists that are needed, it's a different kind of civil project than largely roadway, even though it has certain of those amenities that Katie is talking about. But nonetheless, we have been kind of cross-looking at, where are, particularly with the Mall of America, what parts of the bids do we really have some concerns about, and that's all part of that rescoping process. So we do hope that with some of those reasonable modifications, we can bring that bid back into line.
Thank you very much.
Further questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Did you get that? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, Katie Roth is here again to present on 2018-23, same week, and it's amending the engineering agreement with Hennepin County.
Madam Chair and committee members, I have a second item relating to the C line. In this action, I ask that the council authorize the original administrator to negotiate and execute an amendment to an existing agreement with Hennepin County that will allow us to accept more funding from the county to fund scope related to the road reconstruction portion that we just mentioned in the construction project. This is for the design and engineering contract related to the Penn Avenue and C line work. We executed an agreement in 2016 up to $1.846 million. At the time, our anticipation was that we would be using those funds to fund an engineering contract to design strictly the intersections at which BRT stations are located on Penn Avenue. After that time, Hennepin County decided that they also wanted to reconstruct the portion of street between Broadway and Lowry during the same time, and as such, we added engineering scope into the contract that we hold. The additional Hennepin County funds would be needed for this additional scope, and this amendment would make up to $254,000 in additional county funds available to fund a future amendment to our engineering services contract for this work. The construction phase funding participation for the construction contract we just showed you has been addressed by a separate agreement, so this is strictly an engineering contract, or agreement, excuse me. The Hennepin County Board authorized their participation in this agreement and the additional funds in their November 2017 board meeting. So again, the action before you is to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute Amendment 1 to Agreement 15I-080 with Hennepin County, increasing the maximum county participation by $254,000 up to a new not-to-exceed amount of $2.1 million. With that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions on this business item? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And Katie, I think you're up for our first information item. You're hitting a triple tonight.
Get comfy.
Oh, and before we move to that, the items that need to go on to non-consent, certainly all the same week, and then I think the Mall of America Transit Station bid rejection. What's the committee's feelings on the tab action to approve the regional solicitation to release it for public comment? Are you comfortable with consent?
Madam Chair, I would actually prefer that just go on the regular business
non-consent.
agenda.
Okay.
Just for the sake of raising the profile of that process.
Okay, so we've got items number 1, 3, 6, 7, and 8 on non-consent. Thank you. Sorry, Katie, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members once again. We are very excited to not only be bringing C-Line milestones to you today, but also a significant milestone on the D-Line project. With me today is newly promoted senior planner Scott Janowiak in the BRT project office. He's going to be presenting the D-Line station plan. Once again, I have just a few items to introduce the project to you all. So the D-Line would be the third rapid bus line in the region after the A and C line. This will be a substantial replacement to Route 5, which is currently our highest ridership route in the system. We carry about 16,000 people a day on this route today, and by 2030, we anticipate that with these changes and other growth in the corridor, we'll be carrying about 23,000 rides in the corridor. It's 18 miles, serving 4 cities, Brooklyn Center, Minneapolis, Richfield, and Bloomington, between the Brooklyn Center Transit Center and the Mall of America. With this line, we'd be substantially replacing the 5, running every 10 minutes on the D line, and with a trip that's about 20 to 25% faster than the Route 5, through making the same improvements that by this point will be commonplace in our region after the A line and the C line. Very significantly, we're working right now to identify where the location of the stations are going to be for those rapid bus style shelters, thinking also about the larger buses that will run on the D line. So this line is progressing just behind the C line. We're going through planning right now. We hope to enter engineering in the middle of this year, and construction could begin in 2020 or 2021, pending full funding for the project. So speaking of funding, the preliminary project cost estimate for the D line is about $75 million, and this includes the cost of the stations, all of the construction, as well as in this budget includes our base fleet cost. We've identified about $40 million of that $75 million project budget to date, leaving about a $35 million gap. This is included in the 2018 the governor's 2018 state bonding bill, and we're hopeful that this would be a great way to move this project forward this year at the state legislature. So with that, I will hand things over to Scott to walk us through the station plan.
Thank you, Katie. I am Scott Janoyak, Senior Planner in the BRT Small Starts Project Office. Happy to be here today to talk about the D-Line, and in particular our recently released draft D-Line station plan. This is a major milestone for the project. The draft station plan was released last week on February 5th. Much like the C-Line station plan that was approved previously, this D-Line station plan is looking to answer 2 main questions. One, at what intersection will stations be located? And then within that intersection, which corner would have a platform? It's a very large corridor, 37 stations, 71 platforms are in the draft station plan. For context, that's about twice the length of the C-Line that we just discussed, so it's quite large. The station plan process moves through 3 different phases. This first phase is the draft plan, released last week. We're in a 30-day comment period, collecting comments that will inform the recommended plan, planned for release in the spring of 2018. That would function as a report back to the general public about any changes that are in the draft plan to the recommended plan, and then that final phase would be the approved plan intended for release this summer. So once the full Metropolitan Council would approve that final station plan, that's when the station and platform locations would be confirmed for the D-Line. So that would happen, planned for this summer. I can spend a little time summarizing the planning work thus far, captured in 3 maps in front of you here. The leftmost map represents our work early on in our arterial transitway corridor study in 2012 and 2013. That ATCS really functioned as the initial concept review of the line. It was our first take at what rapid bus could look like on the existing Route 5 corridor. The D-Line project then was formally established in 2015, and this middle map here represents our movement into a more issues-based planning approach in 2016 and through 2017, resulting in that rightmost map of our recommended station locations for our draft station plan released last week. I can dig in a little bit into that second and third map and the transition between them. The issue-based planning approach in 2016 and 2017, we're still focused on that key question of where will stations be located. I think there were 2 things that we needed to identify in 2016 into 2017. One was really identifying those known station locations where we know we need a station and a platform. And then perhaps with equal importance was identifying those station locations or corridor subsegments that we know needed a little bit more of an in-depth review throughout 2017. And that's where we focused a lot of our attention in 2017, was focusing on those kind of orangish boxes on this middle map here. We took in a variety of planning inputs. We did system analysis, looking at things like data and ridership. Another important component was working with our technical advisory committee, a group of our agency partners, Hennepin County, the cities throughout the corridor, Brooklyn Center, Minneapolis, Ridgefield, Bloomington, as well as the park board, to dig into these issue areas and help determine where those recommended station locations should be. A big component of that was a traffic analysis. So it did get quite technical. And then that third pillar of the work in 2017 focused on our community outreach and engagement at these specific locations. That work in 2017 resulted in our recommendations that you see on that rightmost map, essentially filling in those orange boxes with our recommended station locations we're now interested in talking with the public about. It's a long corridor. I can provide a brief overview here, north to south, and give you some highlights of our work in 2017. The northernmost terminal is the Brooklyn Center Transit Center. It then moves southward through the city of Brooklyn Center. The northernmost part of the corridor, I think, can really be summarized as using our shared stations that were determined in the C-line planning process. And then as we move southward into North Minneapolis, project coordination is a big factor here. Knowing that Hennepin County will be taking on a 44th Avenue reconstruction on the northernmost parts of North Minneapolis, as well as the city of Minneapolis implementing a bike ped improvement project on Emerson Fremont. We're doing our best to coordinate with our government partners there on those projects. And then as we move southward, we start to consider how the line interacts with the upcoming Metro Blue Line and Green Line extensions, looking at things like pedestrian connectivity, access points, connecting service, pedestrian movements, things of that nature, traffic impacts as well. Then we move down into downtown Minneapolis. A lot of the planning process here really utilizes decisions and determinations that were made as part of the C-line planning process. It will use shared stations with the C-line in downtown Minneapolis. Project coordination is another important component here. We'll be working and continue to work with the city of Minneapolis on a variety of projects to help make sure that our rapid bus improvements are compatible with improvements they're making, like reconstruction on 8th Street, as well as the future Hennepin Avenue reconstruction. As we continue to move southward down the corridor, we enter South Minneapolis, and here we see consistently high ridership, very high ridership, in particular between Park Avenue and Lake Street. And this high ridership causes us to consider potentially shorter station spacing, closer to that quarter-mile station spacing, as opposed to our more traditional starting point of a half mile. And you do see an additional station location here at Chicago and 24th to help accommodate that extra demand and high ridership. The Chicago Lake Transit Center was another major focus of our planning process in 2017. Our draft station plan does recommend on-street platforms on Chicago Avenue, essentially at the existing transit center. That does a variety of things, but most importantly, what that does is in the southbound direction. That'll save us, we think, about 3 minutes per trip by relocating that stop location that's currently off-street at the transit center onto Chicago Avenue proper. That was a large effort this past year to make that recommendation. And then as we move farther away from downtown, transit demand starts to decrease compared to the more northern parts of South Minneapolis. We begin to consider station spacing perhaps a little longer than that half-mile station spacing. And you'll start to see that as the corridor moves southward towards the Mall of America. Speaking of which, as we move into Richfield and Bloomington, and I think here from the planning perspective, a lot of our work really focused on platform fit and roadway context. There's a variety of interesting things going on in the more southern part of the corridor that we need to be considerate of. An example of that would be Portland and 66th. There is a roundabout there. That'll be our first roundabout encountered in our rapid bus world. So we want to be sure that we coordinate that unique roadway feature appropriately, as well as things like medians on Portland Avenue that help influence where stations can and cannot be located. Then when we get to American Boulevard, pedestrian crossings were a big consideration, and trying to think about how can we help foster safe pedestrian movements where we believe stations should be built for the D-line. I mentioned we did release the draft station plan last week on February 5th. We're currently in a 30-day comment period that leads to what are the next steps. We are in that comment period, and we are actively moving through outreach and engagement activities, several of which are listed here. On-bus conversations are ongoing. We've been out twice already. Neighborhood group outreach. We have a fairly robust online comment system that folks can peruse our project website and look at station information they are particularly interested in. And then we also have 6 open houses beginning tomorrow at the Chicago Lake Transit Center throughout the corridor, concluding in early March. In terms of next steps for the station plan itself, we'll go through this 30-day comment period. We'll process comments we receive, come back with a recommended plan this spring, and then the idea is to seek final approval of the final plan this summer, after which the station locations would be confirmed and we can confidently move into an engineering process. So with that, we can stand for questions.
Other questions? Councilmember Barber. She remembers me now. Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is for on the north end of the line, it kind of affects the conversation between the C line and the D line at the Brooklyn Center Transit Station. Obviously, we'll have increased volumes of buses moving through there. Are there any anticipated concerns there or plans to change anything with that station?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Barber, there's a lot going on at the Brooklyn Center Transit Center. Another piece that we didn't really mention today, but is on the horizon, is that we're going to be adding electric bus charging equipment up there for the C line. And so as we look at that facility, we're thinking a lot about operations and how buses move through there, how customers move through there, and also wanting to be responsive as we hear input and responses from the community about how that functions. So I think that there may be more to come there. As we think about the C line and the D line, we're focused on the where and making sure that there's a safe place for people to get on and off those buses and that there's capacity, but it's an evolving conversation.
Thanks.
Councilmember Latowski first.
Thank you.
First.
Thank you, Chair. I am wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about what the conversation's been around the 46th Street station, because I heard that there was a little, it's hard to imagine where this could be located there, but it's going to be a great amenity. So could you just talk a little bit about how that is going to work?
Good question.
And what the neighborhood reaction is to it?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Latowski, I think that's something, if I can paraphrase what your question is, we have a station included in the plan at Chicago and 46th Street, and there's been a lot of interest in adding a station at Chicago and 48th Street at the commercial node there. That is something that as we take out the station plan, we are going to be seeking and engaging a lot of folks in discussion around that station potential. Our recommendation in the draft plan includes a station at 46th and not 48th, due really to the really close proximity of that 48th Street node, just 2 blocks south of a main connection point to the Route 46 at 46th Street. So we knew there needed to be a station at 46th. A potential station at 48th seemed very close to the station at 46th, particularly in light of the ridership that we see there today, which is not very high. So certainly, though, we want to continue to hear perspectives and go through the draft process of this station and others.
Councilmember Monta.
Madam Chair, Katie, I have good news regarding the C line. I just discovered that Thomas & Sons is a union construction firm That means that they pay their workers fairly for their work, and it's consistent with our equity goals. With that, I would have supported that item.
Duly noted.
Madam Chair,
Councilmember Dorfman.
Councilmember Munt, I will take off my note to follow up on that for you. Thank you.
Councilmember Dorfman.
Madam Chair, thank you. So when you hold open houses at high schools, and there's a couple of them on this, do you reach out and to the schools ahead of time? Because I mean, I think it's an interesting project for students, and particularly these two schools, which have high minority population, to engage the students in some of this work.
Madam Chair, council members, that is a good suggestion. I will follow up on that. And what I can say too, in our on-bus outreach that we have done thus far, we are able to speak with high schoolers as well. The times we've been going out kind of align with, in particular, the release of the school day. And I will say those are some of my favorite conversations with high schoolers in particular, who are users of our system, to get a sense of what they think about the project. So
that's great. Thanks.
I will follow up. Yep.
Councilmember Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I hesitated to speak up on this. I'm really pleased that this is in the planning stages, and it's much needed, and bringing it up to my city in Brooklyn Center. One of the first problem areas that was brought to my attention when I was appointed was the problems in Brooklyn Center. And Brian was really, really wonderful with a number of meetings. We met with the local police. It was kind of a magnet for folks coming up from the city to do mischief. They could get up there and they did mischief. And the local police even had video of what was going on. It was you could see it was frightening, the regular bus drivers, and it was not a good situation, right, Brian? And it has calmed down. We've had to put some more of our own transit police up there to watch, and I'm really happy that this new line's coming in, but I'm a little nervous that we're going to have more problems up on that north end, and I don't know where your planning is or what your thinking is. It was a lovely transit station and had an indoor bathroom and had all that. Well, somebody ripped the toilet off the wall, and there was vandalism, and it was and complaint by the neighbors, and it just is. I just hope we aren't going to exacerbate what the history is there. I've talked to the local mayor about it, and he's very supportive of this project. He wants his constituents and his neighbors and residents to be able to use this and have this good service. He even talked to Aileen about this, about how he was concerned, but he wants the service and he wants the new line. So whatever you have in your head for planning purposes, maybe you can work with Mr. Lamb. I don't want to exacerbate what we have. I just want to improve the situation because it's a very necessary ending to this line.
Are there further questions? I just have a comment. I'm really excited to see progress on both the C line and the D line. The Route 5 is the highest ridership, but I think the Route 19 is one of the highest, right? So with these two ABRT projects, I mean, we are going to improve service for a lot of our riders. So really exciting to see. Thank you. We have one other information item, the Super Bowl service recap. And we have a local celebrity here. Brian Funk was on all the news for a while there. And also AJ Olson to present.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. I'm AJ Olson, Deputy Chief and part of Brian Funk's support team. We're very happy to be able to bring you a recap of the Metro Transit's involvement in the Super Bowl. And then when I say Super Bowl, I'm not talking about Super Bowl Sunday or the 3.5 hours of the game. I'm talking about a full 11 days of operations that we began on Friday the 26th and wound up on Monday the 5th with our extended service to the airport. We are very happy with, in general, with the way things went. And the first bullet here says partnerships worked. And I'm going to talk about internal partnerships a little bit later in this presentation. So for this part, I'm talking about the public safety partnerships. When I say public safety, that's a really broad group of people in this case, which includes bus transportation from Metro Transit and rail transportation from Metro Transit, XL Energy, all the public safety entities from the metro area that you might imagine, all the police agencies, the fire services, and some key federal partners. For us, the key federal partners were the National Guard, the TSA, and the FBI. And I'm even going to count the NFL as one of our security partners. When we learned that if you put together a professional-looking plan and you have the resources to execute it, and you dig your heels in, the NFL will give you credit for being the security professionals that we believe we are. And as the week wore on, that relationship with NFL security became more and more of a hand-in-hand partnership rather than them looking over our shoulder and making sure we were doing things right. Both the police department and bus operations and rail operations staff all had a seat in the multi-agency command center. And if I can direct your attention to the larger picture in the lower right-hand corner, I snapped this photo. This is probably a picture of less than half the room to give you some concept of the number of people in that room. That big screen in front is 18 60-inch TVs stitched together. That's how big that screen is in front. And you can see we have a seats. Our seats are right there in the front row at this end of the room. That bright yellow jacket you see there, it was worn by the rail operations guy in the MAC. The next seat, the vacant seat, was occupied by the bus operations guy. I keep saying I think Dave went on a Red Bull run. Is why that was vacant at the time I snapped the picture, and of course the vacant seat next to that would have been mine. And I was only away because I was snapping the photograph. We happen to have the distinction of having the seat that was the farthest away from the coffee pot and the farthest away from the restrooms, but we managed through the week. But I wanted to point out this picture for a couple more reasons about how thoughtful they were in laying out how these seats were arranged. Next to me is the MnDOT representative, and next to him is the State Patrol representative. And to finish out that front row on this side was the transportation commander from Minneapolis Police. Immediately behind us were Minneapolis Traffic Control, Minneapolis Public Works, Minneapolis Fire Department. And behind them were then some more of our key partners, XL Energy, which turned out to be a really key partner on Super Bowl Sunday, and Bloomington Police, Airport Police, and University Police, all really close partners with us in the transportation section. So I saw just how this sort of arrangement is supposed to work. I was sitting in the seat when there was thought to be a gas leak at the intersection of 5th Street and 5th Avenue in downtown Minneapolis. The fire chief says, "Transit, can you stop trains?" And the rail desk said, "Where do you want the train stopped?" He said, "We got a gas leak at 5th and 5th." And just like that, he said, "No train movement between US Bank Stadium and Government Plaza that fast." That's how that kind of coordination is supposed to work. We manned that post every day, Friday the 26th through Super Bowl Sunday from 7 a.m. till at least midnight. The last couple of nights, I think, went till almost 2 a.m. We did that all with 2 shifts for each of those seats. We can say we ended the week with no major incidents, but the reality is we planned for incidents, and we were successful in exercising the contingencies that all of us together worked on. We worked really hard, literally hundreds of hours of planning with dozens of people ahead of the Super Bowl to talk about what ifs, what if the weather, what if a vehicle failure on light rail, what if a system failure on light rail. And we were very early on Super Bowl Sunday. I was actually occupying a seat at the Mall of America Emergency Operations Center. The first train pulled in, and I get a message on my phone from the planning group that says, our second train broke down at 28th Avenue and was sitting there out of service. I picked up the phone, I called the rail desk at the MAC and talked to Jim Ramstead. What's going on? We lost the brakes in the middle car. There's already mechanics aboard the vehicle. That was part of our contingency plan. Rail vehicle maintenance, stage mechanics along the line, just for this sort of eventuality. Jim tells me the next train has already left Fort Snelling. It's about 6 minutes from the Mall of America, and there's another one 4 minutes behind that. So we had all this tension in the EOC down there at the Mall of America that was immediately quelled by me saying, we got mechanics aboard the train. The next one's 6 minutes away. The one after that's 4 minutes behind that one. We're going to be okay. And the other major incident we had, of course, was the protest over here at West Bank Station. We drilled on that too. What if we have any kind of a rail interruption, whether it's a vehicle, blocking the tracks or a protest? Our plan has always been, no matter what the interruption was, no matter how short we expected it to be, to immediately replace that train service with bus service. The ambassadors, the transit police officers, the transit supervisors, the bus supervisors, and the rail supervisors at Stadium Village immediately implemented a plan, started the bus replacement of that rail service, and it happened so seamlessly that the other part of the plan, the public safety part of the plan, was to send the mobile field force down there with their helmets and their batons and to get into the fight right away and clear the rail. And all of a sudden, the NFL said, wait a minute, you've replaced the service already? And we said, yeah, the service has been replaced, and we can effectively do the rest of the service with buses because our biggest loads were earlier in the day. And so they said, well, maybe we shouldn't interfere with the protest if it's going to cause a confrontation or a negative news story. So what that did, that gave us time to thoughtfully go down there, meet with the representatives of the protest, give them time to have their say, give them time to get cold enough that they wanted to be arrested. And that all went very smoothly as it could have gone. The whole time, bus operations was taking care of that piece of the service force because that's the way we planned it. So at the end of the day, at the end of the day on February 4th, we were all very happy. We got very high marks from NFL for not only the way we handle things, but for being good partners with them. And I heard that from more than one person at NFL Security. So with that, I'll turn this over to my partner, Brian, here, and he'll talk a little bit about the service.
All right, so we're extremely happy with the way that the service went. And when we came to the council before operations began, I presented a slide much like this, but it had bullet points. And now I was happy to be able to change all of those over to check marks, showing that we were able to execute. Our operators, came through in force. As we know, there was tensions through our contract negotiations about the Super Bowl, and we were extremely pleased. The operators came out. We're happy to be providing this service, stuck it out through traffic jams and through adverse conditions, went with the flow and did a remarkable job. And so I'm going to give a few highlights, but as you can see here, we hit all the marks. We obtained our objectives in the operation front. And in addition to that, more than 500 ambassadorships were filled by our internal employees who stood out. The first weekend was nice if you were out there for that. And then after that, it got cold fast. And people spent 2, 4, 6, 8, some people 10 hours outside in the elements, helping our customers, ensuring that people knew what to expect and where to go. So a lot of the credit goes to the overall teamwork of everybody who was on the ground making this function. One of the highlights was our park and ride service on the weekends. So we ran that the weekend before the Super Bowl and then the day before the Super Bowl. General manager was out mixing and mingling and helping our customers. And we had a lot of full buses, which was the good news. We served 5 locations and operated out of the Leamington ramp near the convention center downtown. By our initial tallies, we had more than 18,000 rides on those 3 days for people who didn't have to drive into downtown into a congested environment. And of course, we had our challenges with downtown traffic, but again, our operators, our supervisors, police support all came through to ensure that people got where they were going and were able to get home safely. On February 3rd alone, we had more than 9,000 rides, which we're very proud of. Our partners at Metro Mobility also had a very successful Super Bowl. As was outlined in the presentation for the council, they had identified 8 designated stops. They came through with extra buses, field staff, and ambassadors out and about as well. Partnered with NFL assistants successfully for more than 20 rides to and from the game itself, ensuring that people were able to get where they were going on a very, very cold day. And reported no major incidents. They expanded and had weekend hours in which they were able to help more than 140 people by manning the phones for that weekend. As I mentioned before, teamwork. Tracy Williamson is on our staff, and she's fantastic and was going around to many of the park and rides and sites on the weekend and leading up to game. You can see just the smiles and the people. Everybody was really happy to be out there. Even in face of the cold weather. And as I've mentioned before, this could not have been done without so many dedicated staff putting in their time and effort to make this work. On game day, as Chief Olson mentioned, we started light rail service out of the Mall of America. You can see in the right side there at 11:30 a.m. Inside the Mall of America. We knew it was going to be a busy start to the day. This is inside the East Rotunda. This shows you just sort of a portion of the crowds which stretch down the hallway towards Sears. Mall of America staff did a fantastic job of keeping things orderly and organized. I believe the first person in line was there at about 6:30 in the morning just to say they were first. And I heard stories of exchanging spots in line to go to Aunt Annie's pretzel stand and go to the bathrooms and whatnot. So it was a festive atmosphere from what I was told. And we were able to begin that service as planned, transporting everybody into the stadium. Made all of our arrivals well ahead of kickoff so that people were able to enjoy the game on their schedule. Some more pictures of police and ambassador staff out in the field enjoying themselves on that very cold day, getting ready, helping our customers, and really trying, making the best of an international event like this. Operations went smoothly. We carried folks in, of course, on the trains, on buses, as well as North Star, and overall things went pretty quietly. Deputy Chief Olson mentioned a couple of the different things that we had going on. In the short story in the morning at about 8:30, we were on a conference call, just going through how, restoration of service and kind of final plans. And I was in the bus control center on this conference call, and I could hear that something wasn't quite right on the other end of the line. And I look up at our video board, and the cameras start going dark, and they said, "We just lost power." And this is at the Franklin O&M, where we had every single train we needed to run game day service. Luckily, as Deputy Chief Olson mentioned, inside the MAC, the discussions were already starting. Xcel Energy was getting their crews out there immediately.
I was at the MAC on the same call. I said, they just lost all the power at light rail. And they went, what do you mean at light rail? I said, at the Franklin O&M facility. All in the building, everything. Yard power, building power, they're on candles.
Honestly.
Yeah. And so between Xcel and our own forces who really came up with ingenious ways to ensure that we could restore power safely so that security screening and operations could continue on time. Power was restored within an hour, and the day was able to go on. And so a couple people, skipped the beat here and there, but all things considered, those contingency, the backup, the things we drill on proved very useful. You can see inside our rail control center, it was really all hands on deck. This isn't a paid advertisement for Mountain Dew, but I think that was consumed during the day. You can see the staff very engaged in our overview screen, ensuring they knew exactly what was going on and that all the chess pieces were exactly where they were supposed to be to transport fans and regular customers alike. This is a picture inside our regular transit control center. We stood up in an event operations center, or EOC, in there. We had access to platform cameras as well as the train movements, all of our bus operations going out throughout the day, as well as key staff from operations, maintenance, safety, all in one room. So when decisions had to be made, if this group needed to be consulted, everybody was there plugged in with the most up-to-date information. And many of us were in this room from about 7 a.m. until almost midnight this day, really just making sure that everything was going as planned. As far as the post game goes, you can see in the lower right, this is an overview from our AVL, our automatic vehicle location system. These are all of our buses lined up to provide different operations throughout downtown. In this screenshot alone, we had well over 100 buses staged in the right locations. Our operators were out there willing to help. And our supervisory staff was also down at US Bank Stadium getting ready for the post-game crowds. You can see that they had a celebrity sighting here. This is Pharrell Williams sang the song Happy, and the supervisor said that it's not just a song. He was actually really happy and was nice enough to be able to take a selfie with some of our folks, so they got a kick out of that. And all of this worked just like it should. As far as the trains go, this also worked really well. As we all know, kickoff was at about 5:30 p.m. Everything was delivered on time. By 8:30, the plan that was described, where we had trains in downtown, was executed. In this case, we ended up with 18 trains that you can see down below, which were all packed into downtown. We didn't have any systems issues because of the work that was done ahead of time. As soon as kickoff started, we were able to resume Blue Line service between Fort Snelling and Mall of America, so we could shorten the span of that bus bridge, and customers traveling on the south end of the line were able to use train service again. 9:17, the game that was a barn burner right until the last second concluded, and by 10:21 we were able to restore regular light rail service on the entire alignment, and so we consider that to be a very big success. Our buses were able to run out their trips, stand down, and then prepare for Monday morning. We used 15 three-car Blue Line trains for this post game, 21 for articulated buses, and six three-car trains on Green Line. As the general manager bragged about at our senior staff meeting, I think it's a huge credit to the organization that, once this service ended, it was really late at night. A lot of people were very tired, but for Monday morning, by and large, we only missed a couple of pullouts. Our regular service was provided for our customers who were counting on us. We didn't experience that Super Bowl sick Monday that some businesses experience, especially in their hometowns, and so really proud that we're able to do that, get right back out there and start providing service again. As the chair mentioned, some of us had an opportunity to spend some time with local media. We tried to promote our service, our brand, what we were doing as much as possible through all of the traditional media venues, whether it's TV, radio. On the lower left is a 30-year operator, Camille, who operates out of Nicollet Garage, and on 3 days he provided sort of between set DJ work down at the main stage, and so we went over there one day and came, and he was wearing his Metro Transit hat, just like it was no big deal, and he was really happy to be representing Metro Transit down there, even though we didn't pay him sponsorship money. So we think that we achieved positive results. We created a lot of impressions. We were popular on social media. Our communications teams were hard at work on the street and on the phones and behind the computer desk, communicating with visitors and regular customers alike. We had many vehicle wraps, and our marketing department anticipates that the number of impressions, the number of times we were seen out there, was about 18 million times between the different media outlets, the vehicles, the ad wraps, the different radio commercials, all of those things. And so we had more than 26,000 app downloads leading up to the Super Bowl for visitors coming into town, which we consider to be very successful. And staff visited more than 120 hotels to try to ensure that guests coming in knew exactly what to expect and what their options were on transit, so that they didn't feel a need and didn't drive around the metro, especially on that Saturday when it snowed so much. We distributed more than 110,000 of our transit guides out to people coming into town so that they knew exactly what to expect and what we could do for them. We've been kind of beating this drum a lot, but it really was a remarkable team effort. And this is sort of the primary teams that made up the planning that went into this to ensure that we could deliver successful service. I wanted to make sure that they were recognized here at the committee because Deputy Chief Olson and I represent two areas, but there was a lot of work from a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of heavy lifting throughout the organization, and just, you know, a couple of examples here: facilities maintenance. I mean, extra shifts, extra staff to make sure the platforms in the stayed, you know, just the way you would like them to look. Bus maintenance, making sure we had all the vehicles we needed. LRV and rail systems maintenance. Again, I told you the story about the rail vehicle maintenance folks being ready to go when we had a problem. Bus and rail safety not only worked some of those long cold shifts out there Super Bowl Sunday, but rail safety actually was the one that facilitated our internal tabletops, walked us through the contingencies and helped us do the planning for the contingencies. Information services, they did just a ton of stuff to make sure we're ready to go. Somebody who's not mentioned on here is environmental services. They actually had a big part of the planning. Can you imagine what would happen if the wastewater treatment or system didn't work at the Super Bowl? Yeah, and so they had a team that worked really hard on this. And Brian just mentioned Bruce Howard in the marketing department and all the stuff they did, not only on the front side and being proactive in selling all that advertisement and wrapping all those trains, but then going and visiting those 120 hotels, personal visits. I mean, not calling them up, it's somebody showing up there, working some long shifts at the airport to make sure our guests were greeted and given, and all those different options in terms of their transportation options and making sure that Metro Transit was well represented. I did bring a couple of props. I just wanted to give you guys an idea that it's not empty yet. All right. These are my credentials for game day. Just game day. And my parking passes. And so that's the level of security that existed at different places. I mean, my credentials to the MAC, my credentials to the secure perimeter and stuff. Again, when we're talking about the remarkable team effort, I can say with a high level of confidence that the police department would not have been successful without Brian Funk and his staff, and without Mark Benedict and his staff, and without all the other people you see here. And I know that they feel the same way. I talked about the contingencies that we were able to employ in the case of the protest. Couldn't have happened without bus operations support. And all the planning and all the work that Brian's team and my team and Mark's team did on the front end paid off in spades. And we're, without saying I'm personally proud of myself, I want to say I'm very proud of the organization and the way things turned out. And just in case you think the work's over, it's not. Tomorrow we have two meetings with the planning group and then the ambassador group to talk about what could have gone better. Not that we're going to have another Super Bowl in my tenure at Metro Transit, but maybe Brian's. So we're gonna look at stuff with a critical eye, and the public safety planning group led by Minneapolis is doing the same thing. We're going to have a series of meetings to talk through the after action type things, what went well and what could be done better, because our partners in Atlanta right now are depending on us to tell them what we could have done better. And we intend to live up to that responsibility. So with that, I'll stop talking, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Latowski.
Great. I have two questions, actually. The first is, how did the ridership meet your expectations in terms of the people with tickets using the train to get there?
I have, Madam Chair, Councilmember Latowski, I have not seen the final counts on what our ridership was for those light rail that screened operations. So I have not seen what the final count was. But you know, as you can see, we had huge early in the day loads that started to even out throughout the day. But we were able to fill up, you know, a lot of trains for about an hour and a half, pretty constantly out of the mall.
Okay. And my second question is, congratulations on doing such a great job with our guests and the Super Bowl operations. I'm wondering if you could report on like the impacts to the regular riders and how the bus bridges worked and how the detours all worked.
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilmember Latowski. So I think I have good news stories on that. As you could see in the bus control center monitoring all those operations, All the reports from the field, as far as the bus bridges went, were very positive. We had buses every 5 to 7 minutes, actually, more frequent than what the train service was operating. Going along, had no reports of overloads. We had some full buses, but often they were traveling in tandem, and so we were able to pick people up one after another. And so that service worked remarkably well. On game day itself, traffic did not get as heavy in the downtown area as what I expected. Our regular route service was actually, that was one of the better days we had for on-time performance on game day. I would say the two most challenging periods for our regular customers were on the Friday night leading into the weekend. The road simply became over full, and we started to run out of options, and we detour. I had mentioned we had our detours, then we had detours for our detours, and those things were implemented to the degree that they could be because of sort of overcapacity in the downtown streets. And then again on Saturday, the combination of the snow throughout the day, as well as sort of an influx of, I'll say we had some challenges on our local routes with like charter buses, limousines coming into town, and simply just parking in a travel lane, stopping to be able to do their loading and unloading, which caused traffic delays. Police went there, issued citations, but at the same time, there weren't the commercial tow trucks that could hook up and drag them out of there because they were trying to clear a closed freeway out in Rogers when semis jackknifed and things were going haywire out at 94. So it was, sort of my boss, likes to say that we improvise and overcome. And that's what we did to the best of our ability and tried to communicate effectively with our customers.
Councilmember Dorfman.
A couple of things. I want to thank Councilmember Reynoso for so quickly letting us know how those protesters' arm lock things work. Thank you. I had no idea what those were. And there were lots of, and I want to thank you both for being involved in the planning. There were lots of concerns about what was going to happen to people who are homeless. And you all were saying, no worries, we'll let people know exactly how it's going to work. We're not targeting people on the trains who are homeless. And we kept saying, it's not going to happen, don't worry about it, and it didn't, and the response was really great. I was going around to a number of shelters, people, and fewer of the guys and women rode the trains because they just didn't want to deal with the crowds at night, but those who did said nobody ever hassled them at all, so thank you for that effort. And then just one question, have we had time to assess the financial impacts on Metro Transit, please?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Dorfman, not completely. The costs in particular are still coming in. The end of the payroll period is actually just this last Saturday. So that's going to be a big piece on the cost side. We're getting a good sense so that the revenue overall is coming in right about where we had projected it. It's a little lower on the game day pass sales, but it was more than we believe offset by higher advertising sales. So ultimately, we think that the revenue side will remain strong, and we have every reason to believe that we are coming in right about where we thought on the cost side too. So a good news story that we'll be able to verify probably within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Reynoso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this was a long process, as you guys know, and through this process, there were concerns that many of us had, and you guys did a fabulous job. And and I just want to really thank you. I wish there were more people in the audience right now, right? Right.
The biggest danger you had was me retiring in the middle of it. So.
but you guys did a phenomenal job, and everything I've heard from people that actually went to the game, including my nephew that was from out of town. It worked perfectly. I'm kind of curious as to our texting system. How did that work? I mean, were there a lot of texts or were there a lot of concerns? And did it help with some issues? And just to kind of add to that, I had heard that there were a contingency of people that came to town specifically to kind of do some crime stuff, pickpocketing specifically.
Yeah.
How did that all work out? And I mean, how were the arrests? And
Madam Chair.
PJ.
Councilmember Reynoso, the text to TCC thing continues to gain ground in terms of popularity. The usage in the last 2 weeks of December was almost doubled in the first 2 weeks of January, and I think that we'll see that popularity continue to grow. That's just, as you well know, that's just one of the ways that the current generation of smartphone users likes to communicate. And you know what? The reason I know this is working is because when I saw the January report, it said that the highest number of complaints were for smoking on the train. Nobody would ever call 911 and report that. But they will send a text message and say, hey, there's somebody smoking on this train, and we know that's not okay. And so we got to address some of those things, otherwise it might have gone unnoticed. So I'm very happy with the early results of the text to TCC project, and I just thrilled. It breaks my heart we didn't do it. Couldn't get it done 2 years ago when we started it, but I'm just thrilled with the way it's going so far. To address your question about people that came to town specifically to commit crimes, and certainly transit can be a target for that system because people get in close proximity on our vehicles. We didn't really have any reports of any. The police reports for the entire metro and Metro Transit in particular were very low for the entire week, and I think that's largely due to the elevated presence and the fact that Minneapolis police and our police department, everybody stressed very early on that you're not only there to be present, but you're there to be approachable and make sure that you are a friendly presence to the people, so that when our guests or even our residents see a police officer in the street, they have no reservation about walking up to them and saying good morning or sharing with them a problem. The only reports that we really saw, and it had not, and again, didn't affect transit at all, but the human trafficking unit made a high number of arrests. We know that these kind of events attract that kind of crime, and so not only the BCA human trafficking task force, which had a press release earlier this week, but the larger human trafficking task force, I think they made over 150 arrests in the 10 or 12 days. And the other thing of note was there was a unit specifically assigned to address fraud, or the kind of fraud where people are selling non-licensed souvenirs, the NFL things, trying to sell fraudulent game day tickets, trying to sell fraudulent everything from T-shirts to, anything. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to make sure that we did our game day sales on our Metro Transit app, is so that there would not be the opportunity for fraud on that particular piece. So those were the two things that the public safety group noted in terms of crime for the entire 11, 12 days.
Good job.
Right.
And Madam Chair, Councilmember Reynoso, one of the other uses for the texting system that we did is for all of our ambassadors. So the 500 plus shifts that were filled, when each person started their shifts, they texted in to us, letting us know where they were, that they were out there, and we could use that system to tag them that they were on an ambassador shift, where they were. We had a good accounting of where everyone was deployed in the system. And then if issues came up that, there was going to be a disruption or we had to detour, we could push that out. And then as soon as they checked out of the system, we untagged them so they weren't getting the texts all night long. And so I think it provided a great reassurance for our staff that was out in the field, who that isn't their normal job, or, you might be working alone for a period of time, that they did have that communication lifeline, and it worked out exceptionally well.
Last thing, Madam Chair. You can show off that badge of yours with the Super with the Super Bowl insignia. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we were given the opportunity, Madam Chair, to each of us in the police department to purchase these commemorative badges, and I think over 50% of the police department took advantage of that, even though the badges were more than $100 a piece. So we're very happy, and we've authorized our officers to wear them through the end of this month, and after that, they just become a keepsake.
I think it'd be fantastic if the council members had that out.
Councilmember McCarthy.
I too want to congratulate you and the team and give you, much praises. I do want to make a note. There's been concern about, our regular customers throughout this all. But one of the things that we have not talked about is the exposure that we had to possible new customers within our community. I was exposed to and interacted with many, many Crew 52 members. As you know, there was 10,000 of them, and I was one of them. And many of them had not ever used transit at all until their shifts. And they were so thankful and glad and so surprised at how effective and easy it was. And then also while out on the streets, there was a lot of our regular customers who were very thankful that they got to use the buses on Hennepin for free. So I mean, there was a lot of benefits there, for our regular customers, and also possibilities for possible new customers within our community. So I want to just make sure we point that out. And I also want to point out, as Mr. Land has told us all individually, how transit dependent the Super Bowl was. And that is, that's a big shout out, big kudos to our team for that. We cannot forget that. And in addition to that, I do have to comment on the protesters and how efficient, how effectively Metro Police came out and immediately communicated with the folks who are on that light rail. How quickly they communicated the situation, and then how efficiently and how quickly we responded with the buses. It was so, like you said, it was so seamless, like nothing ever happened. And then with that, Metro Police, again, how efficiently they were in moving the people. And it was almost like within a blink of an eye that the only thing that you heard from, Super Bowl customers were things like, well, gee, why are these protesters out there? And why do I have to go through security again? But after that settled, it was like, wow, they already have a bus. And there was a lot of them going, they already have a bus for us to go there? And I mean, and I was just so proud when, to be a witness of all that. So I thank you so very much. So your contingency plans and all your planning was very well received and was very noticed.
Thank you.
Councilmember Munn.
Madam Chair, gentlemen, did you ever get to see the Super Bowl?
I think Commander Gerlicher said it best when he said, we hosted the Super Bowl here 26 years ago, and we hosted it here last week, and the only thing that was even similar is that there was a football game. But we got to see portions of it. Different command centers had the game on one of the screens someplace. I actually spent part of the first half with the general manager at Rail Operations, and I think you were in the Transit EOC the whole time. You guys probably had a little screen on over there with the. But so we saw parts of it.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Munn. My wife was nice enough to recognize that I probably wouldn't be able to watch it closely, and so she recorded it at home. And then on Tuesday or whatever it was, I was on the treadmill, and I was like, I should see how this actually played out. Watched it, and at the very end of the third quarter, if anyone has it taped, there's a really cool shot, a cutaway shot showing the score and outside view of the stadium, and you can see our buses and a train there. It was very cool to see that. So that was neat.
Are there any other questions or comments? I just have two quick stories. So my husband's employer, I want to thank you for all the engagement and outreach to employers, because my husband got a whole plan for how to, deal with congestion during the Super Bowl. And he comes home and he's like, they really make transit a priority. I'm like, as it should be. And then I also heard that Chair Turumoff was asked I think this was at an employee meeting, who she was rooting for the Super Bowl, and she said Metro Transit. And I agree completely. And that's how I felt all week, and certainly game day. I hope Brian and AJ and Brian and all the employees of Metro Transit really take a moment to be proud of themselves. I mean, it was a huge accomplishment, and you certainly done us proud. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But Brian just told me our first meeting on the Final Four is March 5th, so we're gearing up to get going.
I know what to do.
Is there anything else? Otherwise, we can be adjourned.
Adjourned.